nice article in the Managing Madrid blog. Wonderful lads that do a great job there. And worth reading about that man there. Karim Benzema needs to rest, and the numbers reveal why.
Times ended up almost looking like a 6-3-1. Some very good writing about that on the Managing Madrid website. First-rate podcast as well. Of course, Fede Valverde was a huge part of the equation.
Hello and welcome to a rare Monday night edition of the Managing Madrid Podcast, where we are on Euan's couch in Madrid at nearly 12:30 a.m. after Real Madrid go to Vallecas and lose and put in one of their worst performances of the season. Maybe the worst.
Probably.
So we're here. We're going to break it down. First of all, how are you?
Good.
Yeah.
Like you say, Monday night is always a strange one when Real Madrid play on Monday because they almost never do. But yeah, you went to Vallecas. How was that? It was the first time you've been as a journalist, I think, and it's an interesting, not very organised place.
Let's put it politely. It's a non-organized place. I've been to Vallecas as a fan, and it wasn't even a Real Madrid game. It was Rayo Vallecano versus, I'm not even sure. I think it was Leganés, like years ago. And I was blown away, and I've always told people, like, guys, if you're in Madrid and Rayo Vallecano are playing, go to the game. Don't just only focus on Real Madrid. Yeah. Most of the people listening to this are Real Madrid fans, so naturally, like, that's why they go to Madrid. But, like, look at the schedule. If any of these teams are playing, any of the Madrid teams playing.
Yeah, there's 4 in La Liga, so, like, if you're in town for a Real Madrid game, chances are one of Atleti, Getafe, or Rayo is also at home that weekend.
Yeah, or, I mean, in some cases, Leganés.
Yeah.
You could also do Castilla. You could do Real Madrid Femenino. There's a lot of football to watch here. You could even, like, I've seen, I mean, I wouldn't do, but you could do Rayo Majadahonda. Yeah. You could go get really funky. I've seen Real Madrid Castilla versus Atletico Madrid B games. I mean, derbies are awesome. So anyway, the point is, Vallecas is awesome, and in the build-up to this game, I told people, because I also do a lot of content on YouTube, and I say, like, look, I'm going to do some behind-the-scenes of Vallecas, partly because it's a really, really great away stadium. And mind you, I haven't been to many. I think this is number 8 now on my list of away stadiums I've been to. But it's cool because every single person who goes inside that stadium is a diehard Rayo Vallecano fan. Yeah. With the Bernabeu, you get a lot of tourists, a lot of rich people coming through. The atmosphere is a little bit subdued, but Vallecas is just a madhouse. It's
probably
so
because, like, just a little bit of context of Rayo Vallecano. It's like one of the teams that is very much like a neighbourhood team. It's not just people support them from all over Madrid, even though they do have fans from all over Madrid. It's very much a team of a suburb of Madrid, a specific suburb called Vallecas, hence the Vallecano name. So basically, everybody in the stadium, not only are they a die-hard Rayo fan, they probably live within 3 or 4 kilometres of the stadium in that proper bit of Madrid. So it's a big community kind of atmosphere there, and they love the team. And also, I think that adds to the atmosphere because it's so easy for the fans to get to the games because they all live there. So even on Monday night, it's not so difficult. The Bernabeu on a Monday night can sometimes be a little bit quieter because people live from all over Madrid, and if the kickoff time is late, we have a midweek round this week. I think they play Cadiz at 9:30 on Thursday. That's not an easy one to get home for. Vallecas, they never have that problem because everybody lives pretty much on the doorstep of the stadium, and you see that in the pre-match and obviously in the game.
Yeah, so I have to say, this is one of the weirdest games I've covered because I had no idea what was going on. It was just a complete madhouse. It was mayhem. As soon as I set foot in the door, none of the security guard knows where I'm supposed to go. One security guard literally told me, go ask another journalist. I don't know. And it's a great start. So good thing I got there early. I finally found it. Every single place I've been to is like, it's a seat, like it's a press row. This one is not a press row. You get a cabin. Yeah. I felt so isolated. I had a private cabin to myself. I opened the door. It's a room. I'm like, there's nobody here. I feel like I'm in this wilderness. I like to have people beside me that I can bounce ideas off of. I can talk to. I'm like, hey, did you see that? Hey, what happened there?
Yeah,
I missed it. Yeah, because we have no replay. So that was one thing. The second thing was there were no replays. That's not uncommon. But in the Bernabeu, you can at least, some places have screens. You can look behind you. You can ask. You can talk to people. I didn't see any replays. And quite frankly, my analysis, I think, was not accurate because of that. I didn't see the whole picture. The third thing was there was no clock. Don't know what time was what. I took a bunch of notes, but I can't go back and reference it and be like, okay, when was this note that Modric left space between the lines? I don't know what minute that was. Number 4, I was standing the whole time because the fans were constantly standing in front of me, so I could not see over them. I was standing. I did not sit down one time during the whole game. Anyways,
you're basically a radio journalist today, like just standing the whole time, just.
Yeah, and look, it was fun, and I will never forget it. It was an experience. Obviously, Real Madrid just got played off the park, so there's there's that, but I'll still remember it. So, anyways, point is, I'm going to rely a lot on you tonight to kind of piece things together.
Jigsaw together. You saw things there in the stadium. I watched this one on TV, and maybe between us we know what happened, but also maybe not, because this game was on something. This game was wild, so. Even then, we might struggle to really make sense of what happened.
So, what is your assessment of everything that's happening in the first half? Because, as you and I were talking about it off air, Kroos and Benzema are not playing. Right off the get-go, Rayo put their foot on the pedal. Yeah. They score within 5 minutes. What's happening?
Yeah, like, I don't want to be like, oh, I told you so, I thought this would happen, but like, because often... and I say it to you, and it is proven wrong. But this is kind of the game I thought this would be. For Rayo, kind of the reason we just mentioned, this is their biggest game of the season for Real Madrid. It's a Monday, it's November, it's cold. They just got drawn against Liverpool in the afternoon. That's much more interesting. They're missing some players. It's the World Cup. Even the players who are playing are maybe a bit thinking about joining up with their camps from Friday onwards. This is not the kind of... This was a chore for Real Madrid. For Vallecas, for Rayo Vallecano, it was a party. And you could see that in the attitude to the way they approached the first few minutes. Real Madrid had a very early chance, but after that, Rayo Vallecano settled into it. They pressed like crazy. They worked like crazy. They scored the early goal. They had other chances. They could have scored another. And somehow Real Madrid got 2 goals back-to-back. Really didn't deserve those goals, I don't think, in that moment. I think Rayo Vallecano deserved to go in with a multiple goal lead at the half. And at that point, at half time, you're thinking, okay, Real Madrid have survived this half where they played horribly. They're level. They can go on and win this. And then they played just as horribly, maybe a little bit better, in the second half, and obviously lost it. So, what did you think from the stands? Because you probably are also feeling the atmosphere of the crowd, who I think loved what they saw, because from my point of view, Rayo were just far, far, far better in that first half.
That was clear to me. I mean, that part of it was undeniable. I don't need to go and watch back the game again to know that was the case. Rayo were the better team. I do think, and so part of the thing with Rayo Vallecano is that maybe some people tend to forget that this is actually a really good team. Mm-hmm. They got really good players. I thought Fran Garcia was unbelievable. Mm-hmm. Like, talk about sending a message. On the same night there where Real Madrid's left back was not great. Yeah. Fran Garcia will sleep well tonight. He's saying, like, look, I went and put in a great shift against my former club. Mm-hmm. They still have my rights. Yeah. You have my number. Yeah, I'm here. It's a great tryout for Fran Garcia. That's number 1. Number 2 was they pressed really well. And I think on a night when you didn't have Kroos or Benzema to organize your build-up, as we said many times, Benzema himself is basically a 5th midfielder. He drops deep and he helps with the build-up play. To make matters worse, Modric had a bad night. Mm-hmm. And when Kroos is not in the field and Modric plays the way he did, he was uncharacteristically shaky on the ball, bad with his touches, his passing was off. They just were not able to, like, right before the penalty kick that Asensio earned, I thought, like, I was taking notes. It's like, this is the first time I remember there's a little bit of a spell of possession in Rayo's half. Yeah. And Asensio plays that nice 1-2 with Fede. I think Asensio did well in that to win the penalty because he fights to get to that 50-50 ball, which wasn't perfectly to him. Up until that point, that was like the first time I remember us getting into the half with the sustained spell of possession. There were moments where Vinicius and Rodrigo got in the final third, but nothing like where Real. It was a challenge to just even escape Rayo's press.
Well, that was the thing. I think this game is all about Rayo's press, especially the first half, for two reasons. Number one, their press is really good. It's one of the best in the league. Number two, it's really good at home because you need to keep in mind this is a small stadium, the smallest in La Liga. It's a lot smaller than the Bernabeu. It's 440 square meters smaller than the Bernabeu pitch. I think was the maths of that. I think Rayo's is 100 by 67 and the Bernabeu is the maximum 105 by 68. So mostly long ways is where the difference is. The difference between the two goals basically is a 5 meters shorter than in the Bernabeu. That's actually huge in a football pitch. So not only are Rayo good at pressing, they don't have so much space to cover, and that also means Real Madrid don't have so much space to play the ball out from. And I think we've seen maybe in this game some players passing press resistant or lack of it exposed a little bit, because in the Bernabeu, in most stadiums Real Madrid play in, they have the space to have a little bit of a loose ball. We've spoken about Mondi so many times and how awkward sometimes he is and how the ball kind of gets away from him, but he gets there and recovers. In Vallecas, you don't have the space to do that because there's less space and because Rayo make there even less space than there already is. And I think we saw that from so many players in the Real Madrid back four, in the Real Madrid midfield. I think Tchouameni, Modric, Valverde was everywhere kind of, but these guys just didn't quite have as much time as they normally do. And we know Modric can absolutely play the ball in small spaces. He just didn't tonight. The other players, maybe they're not quite as good at that. And I think this is the game where you really miss Toni Kroos, who was suspended, couldn't play. And I think, okay, maybe not. There's better teams, Barcelona or Atleti, for example, but of all the fixtures in the La Liga calendar, this is one of the ones where you really want to have Toni Kroos when it's a small pitch away from home against a team that's really good at pressing.
That was one of the main takeaways was, as you mentioned, the press, Rayo's press, Real Madrid's inability to deal with it, the poor passing throughout. Ancelotti also said after the game that, when you can't escape the press, paraphrasing, but Vinicius and Rodrigo weren't getting the ball either.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think Vinicius or Rodrigo had a good game, so just that also, it's all a bit of everything, Yeah. It's a bit of everything. The other thing I saw was that I thought Tchouameni was left by himself quite a bit in this game. Wing backs were pushed high. Modric and Fede in particular was pressing high too. He was up the field. And Tchouameni did not really have much help, and he was dealing with a lot. And I think by the numbers defensively, he had a good game. That was in part also why I was surprised that it was Camavinga who came in for... it was Tchouameni that came on for Camavinga.
Yeah.
But, maybe you justify no matter how poorly Modric is playing. Look, he's still creative. He's the only creative midfielder left in the park. Okay, maybe you keep him in. That's fine. So that was another side of it. Defensively, Fran Garcia, as you mentioned, I thought he gave Carvajal hell. Rodrigo, too. I think he got the better of the Rodrigo duels. Mendy, in part, in the first half, I thought he was fine. I know he got a lot of criticism on the second goal, especially. He lets, I forget who it is, slip behind him in the half space. He gets a little bit unlucky. The ball kind of bounces off him, too. We can't really clear it. And then it falls to Alvaro Garcia, who scores from a really tight angle. But then you also, in the second half, I thought Mendy was just brutal because he just kept giving the ball away and he was losing his duels. And this is the other thing. There's a certain, I guess you could measure it. I was going to say intangible, but you can measure it, I suppose, in the amount of duels that were won. I haven't looked at it. I
did look at that because I was thinking the same thing. Real Madrid actually won more duels in the game, but Real Madrid always win more duels in the game in pretty much every game. They're usually going to win more duels. So relative to how big the gap would normally be in Real Madrid's favour, it was a little closer. But no, you're right. It's maybe you can specifically look at these numbers. But also it's kind of the eye test is, I think, the point you're about to make about,
it's just like the eye test told me that Rayo got to every 50-50 ball. They fought, and maybe it felt that way also because every single 50-50 duel was met with the crowd going, like going crazy, right?
You hear the ones they win, you
Exactly.
don't hear the ones they lose.
For sure. But there was a certain fight and grit that Rayo had that I felt like Real Madrid just couldn't match intensity. I also thought there were some physical mismatches too. Like Rayo have some big players. And it was just kind of weird to see it in person, like how much smaller and diminutive Modric is compared to like some of those other midfielders. Which again, that's not even here nor there. Modric doesn't matter if he's 10 foot shorter than anyone; he's still the best midfielder.
No, but in these extra small spaces, it does matter that extra bit because you have that little bit less space to spring away from and get away from the giant defensive midfielder. Here, there's not so much space, and then there's another giant defensive midfielder, or a physical fullback, or So I think it does all contribute. That's not obviously the only reason for what we saw, but I think there's the circumstances of going away to Rayo Vallecano, a good team, a difficult stadium. Not talking about the pitch, by the way. The pitch actually is probably better than the Bernabeu pitch, but just the dimensions of the stadium, the way Rayo play, makes it difficult anyway. Most teams struggle there, but Real Madrid also just a few other elements to this approach to this game just meant on top of that it just wasn't going to work. And Ancelotti I think went through a couple of them in the press conference. He mentioned the physical side of Real Madrid in terms of fatigue. He said they're basically running on fumes at this point, and he
also said everyone is though.
He said everybody is, and he said every team that plays every 3 days, which is not Rayo, to be fair.
Fair.
I'll come back to that in just a second.
Yeah.
And then another thing he said was tactically, maybe I got some things wrong. And he spoke about maybe I should have said once we realised we couldn't play out from the back, we maybe should have played some more long balls.
Yeah.
And Real Madrid fans, I know a lot of people listening to this right now do not want to hear that we should have played more long balls. But I think he was just giving this as not the main excuse or reason for what happened, just an example of something he could have maybe told the players to do differently, and they didn't. Just to go back to the every 3 days thing, how many days ago did Real Madrid last play? More than 3, 5 against Celtic. This is a Monday night game, and this is the thing. So all the coaches always talk about this at this stage of the season when it's busy, and it's the coaches of clubs like Real Madrid who are in European competition, in every competition. So they're playing every time that there's a tournament. We play every 3 days. We play every 3 days. You don't, because that only adds up to 6, and if you keep playing only 2 games every 6 days, you're no longer in. It's really every 3.5 days. Some weeks it's 3. Sometimes it's 3 days between a game. Sometimes it's 4. It's not always 3 days, and sometimes it's 5, like this one. 5 days. The fatigue, I don't think, should have been an excuse for this game, and I don't think Ancelotti really made it an excuse, but he did bring it up. They played 5 days ago against Celtic, a game that they were winning from the start. That it didn't already mean that much. They were going through. They were able to rotate a bit. There was no excuse for the fatigue compared to Rayo in this game.
I agree with that. The bigger question then becomes, because that what you said is true. The big conversation now is, are the players thinking about the World Cup? And I don't.
Which Ancelotti has been very, very clear and careful to never suggest that, and maybe that's why he's saying it's too many games. But
it's also something you just can't say. Like
you can't say. But I think it's true.
You think it's true? Yeah. I don't know what to make of it. So I'm curious to know. Like, here's where I think, because I'm trying to just look at what's happening on the pitch. It doesn't explain the bad passing, the bad decision making, but it would explain not going into 50-50 duels with the same. Although, I don't know. It may be a case-to-case basis, because I don't see Fede Valverde pulling out of any challenges, for example.
No.
I don't know, but maybe it's.
I think it's absolutely a case-to-case. It's not going to be that. What is it? 26 players in the squad, 32 teams in the World Cup, whatever that number is. It's not that every single one of those players is taking it easy right now. Every single player is a bit different. But I think if you average it out at every club that had of Real Madrid size with around 12 to 15 players going to the World Cup, I think every club has 2 or 3 who are thinking about the World Cup, taking it easy in 2 senses. number one, they're not going into 50-50 tackles as much as they normally would. And number two, they're not there. And that brings me to where was Benzema tonight? He wasn't in Vallecas. He still doesn't feel comfortable. Never quite been laid out as he has an injury. Just not comfortable, whatever that means. He's not been comfortable for a few weeks, and it just so happens to be the few weeks before the World Cup. And when this theory was kind of brought up before Benzema started missing games, and I was sceptical. This conspiracy theory. But the way the team's been playing, they need Benzema. He's not been there. He played a little bit against Celtic, but he's not been there. And by all accounts, it's not a full injury. It's something that he could have played for, and other times of the season he would have played for. And Real Madrid have dropped a few points now because of it against Girona in this one.
It's and again, like, measuring on the pitch is very difficult, right? Like, the Benzema's not even playing, but like some of the players that are playing, it's like it's hard for me to look at the field and be like, okay, well, that's an example where he's thinking about, like, I don't know how to measure it, but I think a lot of it is probably, if it's the case, it's psychological too. It's interesting that I was recently writing in my book, the Michael Laudrup section of my book, and he said something really interesting, that after every World Cup, the players are out of form. After, yeah. This is like universal.
Yeah, like a normal summer.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I also, in my mind, had thought about, like, I'm just expecting after the World Cup, something will be out of form. What I did not factor in was that even before the World Cup would be a slump. And I think that becomes really problematic in a title race that has little margin of error.
I think Real Madrid specifically have a lot of players on a lot of teams that will go very far. A lot of French in Brazil, and I think they will go far. And some other clubs, Barcelona, Atletico, for example, have players maybe on teams that are not likely to go as far and or go at all.
Look, still, there's no excuse. We got Camavinga, who's not going to play much if he makes the squad. Toni Kroos is not going. That might be the short list. I was hoping, like, okay, and this guy, and this guy, and this guy, but might be the two.
It's easier to go for who's not going. There's everyone's going. Lunin isn't going, I guess. Although, well, they keep trying to get in. But anyway, that's a different thing. I don't know. It's hard to know, and I think if Benzema is taking it easy and not, and I think there is something there. He's not comfortable and he doesn't want to take a risk. It's not that he's 100% fine and is just chilling. I think we should say that he's probably earned the right. Remember how, and we've seen that a few times, how messed up his finger is because he didn't get surgery when he probably should have got surgery, so he could keep playing and not take a month out in the middle of the season. He's like literally sacrificed his body in the past for Real Madrid. He's won the Ballon d'Or. He didn't go to the last World Cup for those reasons. He's earned the right to take it a bit easy and make sure he gets to Qatar 2022. It's just the cover-up is, I think it's our job to say, look, this is a bit fishy here, and it's cost Real Madrid at this. Not necessarily, maybe they would have also not beat Girona, not beat Rayo, but at this point, it's 5 points are dropped, and I say this all the time. 5 points dropped now are the exact same as 5 points dropped in the final 2 rounds of the season. They all count the same.
Do you think Benzema will play against Cadiz?
I think now he will. I think now he has to.
If Real Madrid would have won this game, maybe there would be less pressure.
Yeah, because Cadiz at home is one that you should be able to win. Maybe on the bench you bring them. I think now he has to, because otherwise...
Knowing how Cadiz set up their defensive block, man, I can already tell that there's going to be some groans in the Bernabeu.
They've only lost one of their past 8, Cadiz. But that's a different podcast for later in the week. But no, it's not the easiest game. But I think the optics of it are awful if Benzema misses that one too, and then goes and plays like 90 minutes of a France friendly like next week. I think he plays that one, and I think he has to after what happened in this one. And also he probably wants to, because you also don't want to go to a World Cup completely cold, having not played any football apart from 20 minutes against Celtic when you're 5-0 up, So I don't know. You're right. This World Cup thing is strange, and it's strange that it seems to be affecting Real Madrid more than than other teams. We'll see what happens tomorrow, because Barcelona obviously won at the weekend, but their similar version of Rayo Vallecano away is Osasuna away on Tuesday night. Let's see how they do there, because that's not an easy game. Osasuna, again, one of those teams that, a bit like Rayo, are kind of underrated, I think, because they're a smaller club. The name sounds smaller, but actually this specific group of players is, like Rayo, quite a good team. Let's see what Barcelona do there. But Barcelona do seem to be managing the pre-World Cup, taking it easy, if you can call it like that, a bit better. Atletico are doing terribly, but their reasons for doing terribly are not because people are taking it easy for the World Cup. It's different things altogether. Real Madrid seem to have this thing a bit more than others, and a shame that the one player who isn't going to the World Cup and would be given 100% was Toni Kroos, and just happened to be the one not available for this one.
It's funny, like, we spend so much time talking about, the reason Real Madrid do better in big games is because, they don't face low blocks. The Gironas, the Cadizes, it's hard to break those teams down. Rayo did not have a low block today.
No.
Rayo had space to attack in transition. Rayo pressed high. Rayo played a brand of football that in most cases would be pretty risky against Real Madrid, against a team that has Vinicius and Fede Valverde. There was no excuses. You got out-intensified, if that's a word. You were late to a bunch of challenges. You did not take advantage of the space, the high line. This was not about low blocks. This was a different blueprint.
It wasn't, you're right. Like, all the normal excuses that you might hear, none of them applied, not enough rest time. You had 5 days. The low block, no low block. Referees, no issues with the refereeing. It was, the Carvajal handball was clear. Carvajal was inside the box for the retake. No issues with that. Like, all the normal excuses you might turn to, none of them applied in this game. This was just a Rayo Vallecano team being better on the day and in the circumstances in Real Madrid and winning the game, deservedly so. And honestly, I think they maybe should have won by more than one goal.
It's funny, and I was looking at the XG just before we started recording. I was surprised to see Real Madrid's much higher than Rayo's. Then I remember the Rodrigo chance at the end, and that the Militao header was pretty high, and also the Modric penalty was another one.
True, but then Rayo had a penalty.
Rayo had a penalty too. Why was this is my brain. I had no idea why it was retaken in the stadium. Why was the Rayo penalty retaken?
Because you were down towards that end. No?
Yeah, I was.
At first, I thought it was Courtois being off his line, and if you really zoomed in, maybe he was close to being off his line. At first, I thought that's what it was, but then they showed on the broadcast later like an image of Carvajal being like way, way inside the penalty area.
Disaster.
Yeah, so really Carvajal gave away 2 penalties in a way. The handball and then that, because I don't think Carvajal influences the rebound, like if he's just a little bit later, I think, Courtois saves it obviously, and then they would have cleared it anyway. So, that's unfortunate, because in modern day with VAR, you cannot get away with that. It's just stupid. It's, and you're almost letting your teammates down. Courtois, a big moment for him, and you've let him down there a little bit by trying to get away and get a second early when there's cameras watching. Or in Vallecas, you expect the cameras are working. You never quite know, but the cameras should be working. So.
That's shocking to me that it was a Carvajal in the box. That's inexcusable.
And they were saying this in the broadcast. Actually, maybe Carvajal. I think we're getting an image, and then they show you the image, and it's like one of those ones when they draw the offside lines and they don't even draw the second one because it's just like
it was obvious.
Oh yeah.
That's brutal. I mean, he had a poor game. He's been poor the last few games, and to just again letting Courtois down like that, I think it's pretty inexcusable, because there's no reason to rush into the box.
No,
fight to get the rebound, sure, but for such a fundamental error and a penalty to be retaken, that could be a game changing moment. Because I will say, no matter how badly Real Madrid played, they somehow went up 2-1 by halftime. And we've seen Real Madrid pull out points out of their ass without playing well before. So it was not inconceivable for me even like Rodrigo chance at the end out of nothing nearly equalized it. That they could have still salvaged it, and that's a huge letdown.
Well, at this point in the game, just talking about the kind of flow of the game, because I think we kind of discussed the first half. Rayo were just better throughout, and Real Madrid had 5 minutes where they won a penalty, had a corner, and 2 goals.
Yeah.
I was surprised that at the start of the second half, Rayo were still on top, and that was when I saw the penalty saved and thought that was it. It was a save. Mm-hmm. At that moment, I'm thinking, not only have Rayo not scored here, I think this could be a momentum changer for Real Madrid's benefit. You know, you save a penalty, Rayo maybe start to think this isn't their night. Like, it's almost worse to have a penalty and miss it than to not have a penalty and just continue playing quite well, pushing them back, not having created the chance yet.
Right.
To have the penalty and miss it sometimes can be the worst thing, because then the momentum swings, the emotions swing, the crowd can swing. But then, of course, obviously they get the retake and they score that one. So I think, that was the key moment of the game. Really, like, was that penalty, the two attempts, and Courtois almost saves the second one. But yeah, fair play to Trejo as well for taking the two of them, because you see that more and more nowadays. I think where when someone misses the first one and it's to be retaken, they switch it because but he took both, and fair play to him, he scored the second.
Was there anything else from Ancelotti's press conference that stood out to you?
I think there was one thing, actually. I just did it. Let me see. Real Madrid fatigue, losing the league. Vinicius. I haven't really mentioned Vinicius, but this is Vinicius' composure. And now, I don't know if you saw this in the first half when Vinicius got booked. He was furious. He kept arguing with the referee, and Ancelotti had to pull him aside and tell him to stop. I guess you could also see that because that was where
I actually needed. That was one thing I meant to ask you, because it was just pure chaos. I couldn't see anything. The fans were in front of me. I just knew that Vinicius and something was happening. That's all I know. So explain, please.
So Vinicius gets booked obviously for a foul. You know, not really. I don't think it should be a yellow card, but he saw it a bit late. Okay, fine. Vinicius, most other players at that point would keep their composure a little bit more. Vinicius just could not accept that he had got booked. I think because he gets kicked all the time and often it's not a yellow card, he could not accept that he was booked for it and just kept arguing. And you've seen it before where the referee takes out the second yellow, you got booked for the foul, you got booked for the dissent, and you're off. And this was early in the game, and I think Ancelotti is saying that. And even as Ancelotti literally has his hand on Vinicius' shoulder, trying to walk him away, he's still shouting at the referee. It kind of cools down, the referee goes away, Vinicius shouts one last time, has to get the last word for some reason, and really risk getting the red card, the second yellow there. Then he has to go for the rest of the game, and I think at this point, the Rayo players were quite kind of smart. This is, part of the sport as well, as they targeted Vinicius from that moment on.
They tried to get him
in the sense of he's seen red, he's a bit volatile, let's try and provoke him. And Baliu really kind of went for it maybe a bit too much, and I think, a few fouls that he gave away, which was needless, trying to do it a bit more physical than
I saw the push, like, was right in front of me.
This one is silly, but I think he's doing that to try to get Vinicius to react. There was one, I think, was it someone else, and then Vinicius rolled over on top of him, or was that the same moment? They were just trying to get Vinicius to lash out, Beckham on Simeone style or something, and with good reason, because Vinicius has kind of shown the last few weeks that, his attitude in those moments when a few things don't go his way is not been good the last few weeks. And Ancelotti's been asked about this time and time again, and that this one really came close to a second yellow being shown. Different referee, one of the more strict ones in La Liga would have shown that second yellow, and I don't know what you do about that. But you want Vinicius to play with that kind of chip on the shoulder, but you can't respond to the referee with that chip on the shoulder. Respond to the other players. Do your dribbling, dribble past the fullbacks. Take on those players that are trying to wind you up. The referee, you can't be acting like that to the referee, because he's the one that holds the cards.
I don't think also we can discount the fact that Vinicius has been playing a lot of this season without Benzema on the field.
And Benzema's usually the first one there to...
Yeah, I think Benzema's absence has impacted Vinicius in some way, because Benzema's the kind of like the older brother.
You're not talking tactically right now. You're talking like...
I'm talking about like emotionally. Yeah, like Benzema would be like, hey, just slow it down, relax, let the game come to you. Don't get into these mind games. You're better than this.
Yeah.
I think there is some element of that that's missing on the field, that leadership.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
Regardless, I don't think it's good for Real Madrid when Benzema's not in the field. I think we got a little bit carried away in that Atletico game where Benzema didn't play, and Fede, Vinicius, and Rodrigo were amazing in that first half.
Yeah.
Benzema's leadership is like incredibly important.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, and this idea of Rodrigo as the false nine is fine to me as a backup, not as like the blueprint going forward, you know, as a solution.
It's nice, it's fine, maybe something for the future, maybe something for the occasional game. If Benzema's suspended, for example, rested, but not a Benzema injury or lack of comfort, where he's out for several games in a row, and you're playing Rodrigo as the number 9 several games in a row. It just, you know, for many reasons, tactically and, like you say as well, emotionally, because then Vinicius is the older player than Rodrigo and supposed to be the leader then of that attack, and you know, Vinicius is still a kid as well, so that was the other interesting one from the press conference. And Ancelotti basically just kind of agreed, you know, he said he had a tough game, never mind with the referee, and he said in this kind of game where we can't bring it out from the back, the forwards suffer more than anyone else. And the last thing he said was today Vinicius didn't play at the level that he's done most of the season, which was honest but true.
Is Asensio one of the players who
probably Real
maybe
Madrid's
was a little
player?
bit better?
Probably Real Madrid's best player. I mean, usually these games when Real Madrid do terribly, no one saved himself, well, except for Courtois. But Courtois, even with the penalty thing, the second goal, it kind of goes right through him. So, I would say Asensio's probably Real Madrid's best player. Surprised, actually, not that he started, obviously, given who was available, but that he lasted, like, the whole way. But I mean, he wins the penalty, kind of, you know, gets in that position and sort of drags Fran Garcia into him, and then kind of makes the tangle happen and wins a penalty, and then puts in that fantastic ball for Rodrigo right at the end that Rodrigo hits over. You know, I'm sure that'll become a meme, but like, you know, the ball bounces just before it gets to him. It's harder than it looks, and it looks worse when it's, you know, there's no stand there and you're literally hitting. Did you see the Valverde shot into the balcony?
Oh my god, that was
you
just
were probably
like
looking at it like
it was like
a
rocket into the sky. It was crazy.
If you don't know what we're talking about, look, just type in on Twitter Valverde balcony.
Wait, did it actually hit a balcony? Like, because there's that famous apartment there that overlooks the.
Valverde hit a shot and it went in the balcony. Like,
oh man,
flew and like hit like the roof of the balcony. Probably broke some stuff. Like, I'll show you as well. Like, look it up. Like, it's insane.
Someone's had to have like. I mean that.
Definitely this happened before, but like, I don't think ever like at that angle where it was still like rising as it reached the balcony. Like, it was just
like straight into the sky. I mean. So if people don't know what we're talking about, in Vallecas there's an apartment is it the north stand? South?
I don't know my geography. That
doesn't matter.
Like east. They don't really.
Doesn't matter. Whatever stand, whatever you want.
The stand isn't a stand.
There's no stand. So there's an apartment, and people who are living in the apartment, if you're lucky enough, that real estate must be worth like a lot. No, come on, it's overlooking the stadium. Unless they build a stand at some point. No,
like, so in Eibar they have the same thing. They have two apartment blocks that overlook. And speaking to the people who lived in those apartments in Eibar, they all... One of the guys joked like, it's really annoying actually having it because we need to host parties and I need to spend all this money on wine and chorizo and whatever. That was kind of a joke. But they were saying like, even though I have this overlooking the stadium, like I'm still getting my season ticket and I'm going down and watching the game in the stands. Like, and I feel like Rayo was probably the same. Like, you actually look, there's sometimes you see a couple of families in the balcony or not, but most of them are empty. Not because they're not football fans, probably because they're in the stadium. So I think it's a little bit to us that are football nerds and like would want to just like look out the window and see a La Liga game. That sounds amazing. But if you're like a Rayo fan, you also actually just want to be in the stadium. So,
Fair enough. Good, solid counter argument. But either way, there's an apartment there that overlooks the stadium. Like literally, it's like in the stadium almost. It's like it's that close. And so Fetty hit a balcony or something.
Like it went straight in. Yeah.
That would have been a hell of a souvenir if you can just like somehow just let it land and keep it in your balcony.
Souvenir depends how much it broke on the way, but yeah.
Also true. There's something I was going to say.
We got off tangent
before the Fede shot tangent.
We're talking about the Rodrigo shot, which also went over that stand, but as far as we know, didn't hit any balconies.
Rodrigo had a couple good positions of, I'd say 3, where he got into good positions in the box and just shot it over the bar. Not a great night on him from an efficiency standpoint and an anything standpoint, really. There was something else there. I'm not sure, but I'll jump ahead, I guess. Is there anything in your 3 questions, 3 answers that we haven't talked about? Is it published yet, or is it not?
No, not up yet. Still to finish the last couple, but I think we kind of talked. Yeah, Kroos, Rayo Vallecano intensity. Smaller dimensions. Yeah, one of them was I saw a stat going around that this was the least distance covered by Real Madrid in a game this season, like kilometers wise.
Wow, that's a good measurement of intensity.
But I would counter that with this is the smallest pitch they played on. Like I said, 440 square meters. It's you don't need to or don't have to run as much. When. For example, when Real Madrid is playing a high line to try and play Rayo offside, which didn't actually happen that much in this game, but when you need to sprint this way or sprint that way, the distance you have to sprint is less. So it's absolutely normal that the pitch where the game where you cover the least distance so far this season is on the smallest pitch. To an extent, also I think the stat is true to some extent as well, that this probably was a game where Real Madrid didn't maybe put in as much. You don't like to use the word effort because it's not about. I think it is effort, but mostly because the players are tired, which is not their fault. It's the games, all these things that we've talked about. But in terms of how much running and effort in that sense they put in, Ancelotti kept using the word contundencia, which is like doesn't really like it kind of translates to like drive, like strength, forcefulness, like. He said Rayo outmatched us in that, and I think that's true, which is normal in a sense.
I'm also not sure, Ancelotti said, things he could have done differently, whether it was like long balls to escape the press. I mean, the long balls also were pretty bad if you look at the numbers too, for the most part. This is what happens too when Kroos is not in the pitch.
Yeah.
Carvajal not bad, 4 of 6. Mendy, 6 of 7. Sorry. Militao 3 of 9. I think. Courtois 1 of 8. Courtois' distribution was not great also because he just really had nothing going for him. But also, like, as a manager, what do you do when you see your team just getting beat to every single loose ball? It's hard to motivate your players in that situation. Like, coming to halftime, like, hey, can we just have more fight? Kind of a new trend, but every time Real Madrid need a goal in the second half, the theme is Mariano Diaz comes on before anybody else.
It's been happening a bit more and more.
Hazard has disappeared off the face of the earth.
We've done the Hazard thing a million times, and I think we all agree at this point. There's very few situations where Hazard makes sense to come on for Real Madrid. It's definitely not in Vallecas in a game like this.
Not when you need someone to fight.
Even less compared to the other games where Hazard also probably isn't the right option. So,
I believe.
My opinion, I'm stating it like a fact, but I think this game would maybe Hazard comes on and like is somehow the magic ingredient that unlocks it, but I think Hazard in this game is like the worst possible game for Hazard. I
mean, I think you just needed some steel and some muscle and some. That's what Camavinga made sense to me. Although I don't think Camavinga, some of his touches, like his first touch, he nearly gave Rayo a goal. Yeah. But either way, Mariano Diaz has been coming in, and he becomes a target. Was it against Girona? He actually played well off the bench.
Maybe.
I think it was Girona.
That kind of crazy like scramble to recover after the penalty.
What I've always said about Mariano is that, listen, he's not a high IQ football player, but goddamn, does he leave his mark? You just know he's there. He breaks his own bones. He breaks the opposing team's bones. He's not. He's at least he shows himself. I'm kind of a broken record about this. I think people probably think I have an agenda or something, but I've been calling out for Sergio Arribas and some of these younger Castilla players. In games like this where you need, where the problem is, first of all, people are looking at the World Cup. They're scared of getting injured. Bring in some of the kids with some bark who are playing really well at the youth level. Maybe I'm just going crazy, but I would love to see it.
And that goes back to a point of other clubs are managing this pre-World Cup time a bit better. Other clubs are doing that. Real Madrid really haven't.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, we're at 45. Not bad. I mean, is there anything else? Anything we missed?
I mean, it was such a crazy game, probably, but I think we kind of, in a very weird, non-chronological, non-structured order, kind of gone through many points.
It was an unforgettable experience. I will never forget my cabin, my wilderness cabin. The chaos, regardless of what happened, it was just so eventful. There was so much happening on the field. It was a fun La Liga game. If you're a neutral looking at this game, you had a lot of fun.
No, this is always one of the best fixtures. Like every year, like Rayo versus Real. Like I think this is a game really Rayo fans want to also beat. Barca. I think Real Madrid's the scalp they want. Like Real Madrid is not popular in that part of Madrid.
I seem to recall just like Barca just have a terrible time at Vallecas in recent memory. They've been losing a few games there.
They lost there last year, which I think was the one.
I think it was a couple years running.
I think so. Well, they only got promoted again last year. Back in the day, in the Guardiola era, it was the first time they lost a possession battle against Paco Gémez' Rayo, which was a big thing for Barcelona because they'd won the possession for like 5 years or something every game. But yeah, I think it was the game they lost there last year was basically the end for Koeman. I don't know if that was the game he got sacked. I think it might have been when they lost to Falcao penalty.
Well, that's their problem. Don't care. All right.
You brought it up.
I know, I brought it up. All right, well, we got Cadiz, and then we got the World Cup. What a weird thing to say in November. Kind of weird.
Sounds fun.
It'll be something. We'll wrap it here then. Euan, thanks for your time.
No problem.
Thanks for hosting as always. And we will be back. It's Monday. At the very latest, we'll be back Cadiz post-game. So if you want access to that, that'll be for free, and then we'll do mailbag for patrons after that. But if you like what you listen to, you like the analysis, you like the coverage, you like a little bit more in-depth analysis and detailed discussion on the games from the ground. If I'm not going to games, Euan's going to the games. If you like to support high-quality journalism, go to patreon.com/Managing Madrid. Euan, thanks. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Take care. Peace. All right, thanks for listening, guys. Also wanted to give a quick shout out to our $10 plus patrons. Well, shout out to all of our patrons, really, because you guys make this show possible. We really appreciate you being part of this Real Madrid family and growing with us. Shout out to our $10 plus patrons specifically because if you pledge $10 or more, not only do you get guaranteed responses to your questions, but you also get a specific shout out on the podcast. So shout out to Brandon Alvarez, Willie Reed, Will Sousa, Way Paring, Wamik Jamal, Tobias Arroyo Botcher, Tariq Goktas, Talib Salhab, Tahmid Kalam, Sujai Wani, Sumanshu Singh, Sheikh Hatiri, Shamil, Shabaz Sharapov, Sergio Arispe, Santos Solorzano, Samuli Justin, Samir Z, Said Mahad, Sai Mohan Sasikumar, Rodrigo Balmaceda, Rishi D, Phoenix, Peter Powell, Paulo Fierro, Patrick Odayafari, Oscar Barrera, Nico Laxo, Nicholas Moeller, Mowgli, MJ Diego, Michael Zinberg, Nick Ribeiro, Marin Myrtle, Matthew Atkins, Martin Ridman, Magnus Lext, Logan Stahl, Leon Stavronakis, Kunal Talakar, Crystal Glass, Kevin Rivera, Jose Cruz, John Fernandez, Jason Fitz, Ian Marley, Graham Gerard, Gary Kohut, Frederick Antakiro, Frederick Sundros, Faisal Hamdan, S.A. Davisito, Elo Enriquez, Edward Sossman, Daniel Williams, Con P, Christian Toft, Christian Acosta, Charles Williams, Brendan Powers, Brandon Stevens, Ashik Bashar, Arnab Mukherjee, Armand Gashi, Armando L, Antons Rudenko, Anirudh Singh,
Ananya Kumar, Alex Steiberg, Al, Azaz Hussein, Adrian Rios, Adarza Lukovic, Adam Dorsey, Bella Chow, Varun, Ramtin Maklur, Fabian Moreno, and Daniel Smith. Thank you guys. We love you all. And Hala Madrid.